No one had ever dared approach her. But one human didn't know what fear was. The sky over the Nevada desert burned in shades of orange and purple, as if the sun itself was reluctant to set. It was 2035, and the tiny town of Ely, forgotten by just about everyone except truckers and UFO hunters, was buzzing with strange energy that night. The lights along Highway 50 flickered erratically, and the local radio station kept cutting out, static whispering like a warning. Ethan Caldwell, a 32-year-old mechanic with calloused hands and a heart that didn't know how to quit, stood on the porch of his garage, cleaning grease from under his nails with a pocket knife. He didn't believe in flying saucers, but something in the air that night made him feel like the world was about to turn upside down. Ethan was the kind of man folks in Ely called stubborn as a mule. Tall, broad-shouldered, with messy brown hair and a gaze that carried both weariness and curiosity. He'd grown up fixing pickup trucks and listening to his grandpa's stories about strange lights in the desert. Nonsense, he'd always say. But tonight, as the wind carried a sharp metallic scent, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something big. 100 kilometers away, hidden among the red rocks of the desert, an alien ship lay silent as a shadow. Its surface, a mosaic of panels that pulsed like living flesh, shimmered under the twilight sky. Inside, Commander Zanara of the Clithian fleet monitored holographic displays with eyes that glowed like distant stars. Her skin, a shimmering silver blue, gleamed in the dim cabin light, and her features, sharp yet hauntingly beautiful, radiated the presence of someone who led entire legions. Zanara was feared among her kind, a ruthless strategist whose commands had decimated entire fleets. But here on Earth, she was alone, sent on a secret mission to study humans, a species her people considered primitive, yet dangerously unpredictable. Zanara didn't understand why she'd been chosen for the mission. Maybe it was a test. Maybe it was punishment. The sensory filaments that rose like delicate antennae from her head picked up vibrations in the air. Human emotions, chaotic and intense, unlike the cold logic of the Clithians. She felt something she couldn't name, a mix of fascination and discomfort. Earth was noisy, disordered, full of contradictions, and yet, something about it made her hesitate to complete her mission, gather data, and leave without a trace. Back at Ethan's garage, the radio crackled again, and a distorted voice came through. Severe weather alert. Avoid open areas. He chuckled and tossed the knife onto the counter. A storm? The sky was clear, but then a blinding flash split the horizon, so bright he had to shield his eyes. The ground trembled, and the distant groan of twisting metal echoed through the desert, like something massive had crashed Earth. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and truck keys, ignoring the voice of reason telling him to stay put. He was never one to sit still. As he drove down the empty road, his headlights caught something that made him slam the brakes. There, among the cacti and rocks, stood Zanara, her alien armor gleaming under the beams. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time froze. She was tall, almost 6.5 feet, with a presence that seemed to bend the air around her. Ethan should have been scared. Anyone else would have been. But he didn't know fear, not when something or someone felt as out of place as he did. "You lost or something?" he asked, his voice steady, laced with sarcasm. Zanara tilted her head, as if trying to decode his tone. Her mission required stealth, but here she was, exposed, with a human staring straight at her. And against all protocol, she answered, her voice echoing with a metallic undertone. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan grinned and turned off the headlights. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. That moment, so simple and so unlikely, was the beginning of something neither of them could have seen coming. The desert, vast and silent, seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew the encounter between a stubborn mechanic and an alien commander was about to change both their fates. The Nevada desert seemed to swallow the sound of Ethan's truck tires as he kept his eyes fixed on Zanara. The alien stood still, like a statue carved from light and shadow. Her sensory filaments quivered slightly, picking up something Ethan couldn't feel. Maybe the truck's engine, maybe the pounding of his heart, which, despite his calm demeanor, was speeding up by the second. The air between them was charged, not with electricity, but with a tension that bent reality. "Look," I don't know where you're from, but standing out here in the middle of nowhere isn't exactly safe, Ethan said, stepping out of the truck with his hands raised, a reflex to show he wasn't a threat. He noticed her armor, or whatever that second skin was, clung to her like liquid metal, reflecting moonlight in mesmerizing patterns. Zanara didn't answer right away. Her eyes, large and golden like molten metal, studied him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being taken apart piece by piece. "You are human," she said finally, her voice ringing with a strange rhythm, as if each word was carefully chosen. "Why aren't you running?" Ethan laughed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Run? To where? This is my home, and right now, you're standing in my backyard." He stepped forward, ignoring the voice in his head telling him to keep his distance. "Besides, you don't look all that dangerous." Zanara tilted her head again, a gesture Ethan guessed meant confusion. The Clithian files described humans as fragile, impulsive, driven by primitive emotion. But this man didn't fit the profile. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't pointing weapons. He was just talking, like she was a lost traveler, not a commander capable of wiping cities off the map. "You don't understand the risk," Zanara said, stepping forward. Her movement was so fluid it seemed to defy gravity, and Ethan felt the air grow heavier, as though space itself was reacting to her. "My presence here is unauthorized. If others of my kind find out, there will be consequences." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Consequences? Like what?" "Alien invasion. Men in black knocking on my door." He was joking, but the look in her eyes made him swallow hard. There was something there, an undercurrent of truth he didn't want to admit. Zanara hesitated. Her mission was clear: observe, gather data, avoid contact. But her ship, damaged during the forced landing, was inoperable, and her sensors indicated that a Clithian patrol was on its way to investigate the emergency signal. If they found her in the company of a human, the consequences would be severe, not just for her, but for him. The Clithians didn't tolerate witnesses, and yet, something about the stance of this human made her hesitate to eliminate him, as her logic demanded. "You need to leave," she said, her voice carrying a new urgency. "Now." Ethan crossed his arms, his grin fading. "Look, lady, I don't know what kind of mess you're in, but here on Earth, we don't leave people, or, aliens, alone in the middle of the desert. Come with me. My garage is about 10 minutes away. We can talk there without turning into toast under tomorrow's sun." Zanara frowned, or at least what Ethan guessed was an alien frown. "You don't understand. My species doesn't negotiate, doesn't trust, doesn't get involved." "Yeah, well, my species is kind of stubborn," he shot back, gesturing his truck. "Get in, or I'll carry you, and that'll be awkward for both of us." For a moment, Zanara considered neutralizing him. A single motion of her hand could trigger the energy pulse in her armor, erasing him without a trace. But something stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity, or the way he looked at her. Not with fear, but as if she were just another person, not some interstellar threat. Against all her instincts, she stepped toward the truck. The drive to the garage was silent, save for the growl of the engine and the static crackling on the radio. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, his mind racing. He didn't know if he was crazy or just having the strangest night of his life. Zanara, meanwhile, analyzed everything. The smell of old leather on the seats, the glow of the dashboard lights, the way Ethan drummed his fingers on the steering wheel like it was just another ordinary night. When they reached the garage, a rusty metal building with faded signs, Ethan killed the engine and turned to her. "All right, now tell me what's going on, because I don't believe in fairy tales, but you're definitely not from Las Vegas." Before Zanara could answer, the ground trembled, and a red light streaked across the distant sky. Her sensory filaments shot upright, and she grabbed Ethan's arm with a strength that made him wince. "They're here," she murmured, her golden eyes wide. "My kind. They know I've failed." Ethan looked out the window, spotting strange lights dancing on the horizon. "Friends of yours?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "They are not friends," Zanara said, her voice laced with something Ethan immediately recognized: fear. "And if they find us together, you won't survive." The red lights on the horizon pulsed like the heartbeat of an awakening beast. The garage floor vibrated, causing tools to clatter off shelves and metallic crashes. Ethan still felt Zanara's grip on his arm, strong enough to leave marks, but her expression, those golden eyes now clouded with panic, anchored him in the moment. The alien commander, who minutes earlier had exuded an aura of unshakable control, was visibly shaken. Ethan didn't know much about spaceships or alien invasions, but he could recognize someone in trouble. "They know I'm here," Zanara said, releasing his arm and retreating to a workbench cluttered with wrenches and oil cans. Her sensory filaments quivered wildly, picking up signals Ethan couldn't begin to perceive. "The emergency beacon from my ship. I couldn't disable it in time." Ethan rubbed his arm, trying to piece it all together. "All right, let me get this straight. Your alien buddies are coming to pick you up, and that's bad because... why exactly?" He peered out the window, watching the lights now forming a pattern, like a swarm of giant fireflies organizing themselves. The air felt heavier, filled with a low hum that made his teeth vibrate. Zanara hesitated, and Ethan noticed. In Clithian reports, humans were deemed insignificant, but the truth was more complicated. Her mission wasn't just to observe. She was meant to assess whether humans posed a threat to Clithian dominance. Her presence on Earth was already a violation of galactic treaties, and being seen with a human, someone who had seen too much, made the situation untenable. "They're not coming to save me," she said, her voice quieter now. "They're coming to erase any evidence of my failure, including you." Ethan turned to her, his face hardening. "Erase? Like, turn me into dust? Sorry, but that's not part of my weekend plans." He grabbed a hunting rifle off the wall, more out of instinct than any real belief it would help against alien ships. "All right, so what's your plan? Because standing around doesn't seem like a great idea." Zanara eyed the weapon, intrigued by his boldness. No Clithian would face a patrol with something so primitive. "My ship is damaged, but I can try to repair it. If I succeed, I can leave before they arrive." She didn't mention that leaving would mean abandoning Ethan to his fate. The Clithians wouldn't leave witnesses, and she knew it. But something inside her, an emotion that didn't fit her logical programming, resisted the idea of leaving him behind. "Then we go to your ship," Ethan said, already grabbing the keys to the truck. "Where is it?" "You don't understand," Zanara snapped, her tone sharp. "If you come with me, you'll be an even bigger target. They'll track your heat, your essence. You're vulnerable." Ethan let out a dry, defiant laugh. "Vulnerable? Lady, I grew up fixing engines in the middle of sandstorms. If your buddies want to fight, they'll have to earn it." He swung open the garage door, letting in the desert's cold night air. "So, are you coming or not?" Zanara froze for a moment, torn between logic and something new, something humans seemed to carry so effortlessly. Hope. Against every directive, she nodded. "The ship is 12 kilometers southwest, but the terrain is rough and time is short." The ride down the dirt road was tense. The truck rattled and shook, its headlights slicing through the dark while red lights in the sky drew closer. Ethan kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the shotgun, even if it was more for comfort than any actual use. Zanara sat beside him, still as a statue, though her sensory filaments were alive, picking up the hum of the engine, the wind, and something else. The Clithian patrol signal, now just minutes away. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, breaking the silence. "You don't know me. You've got no reason to risk your life." Ethan shrugged, eyes on the road. "I don't know. Maybe because leaving someone stranded just isn't my style. Or maybe I just want to see how this crazy story ends." He glanced at her, a crooked smile on his face. "What about you? Why didn't you erase me back there, like your orders probably said to?" Zanara didn't answer. The truth was, she didn't know. Something about his stubbornness, the way he treated her like an equal, was messing with her in ways that made no sense. Before she could say anything, a loud boom shook the truck. A blinding light flashed ahead, and the vehicle skidded to a stop just inches from a smoldering crater. In the sky, a smaller Clithian ship hovered, deadly and precise, its energy cannons glowing like predator eyes. A metallic voice rang out, in a language Ethan didn't understand, but Zanara did. "Commander Zanara, surrender. The human will be eliminated." Ethan looked at her, heart pounding but voice steady. "Well, Commander, what's the plan?" Zanara knew she had a choice: surrender and ensure her own survival, or stand with a human she barely knew, risking everything. Her filaments picked up the heat radiating from him, the wild courage that seemed to spit in the face of fate. For the first time, she felt something her people had no word for: loyalty. "Run," she said, activating a device on her armor that let out a flash of light, scrambling the ship's sensors for a few seconds. "Head to my ship. I'll hold them off." Ethan grabbed her arm, eyes burning. "Not a chance. We go together, or not at all." The choice was clear: follow her plan and maybe survive, or stay and face an enemy he had no hope of defeating. The hum of the enemy ship grew louder. Time was running out. The desert air buzzed with the drone of the Clithian ship, hovering like a predator ready to strike. The glow of its weapons pulsed, casting flickering shadows over Ethan's truck. Still holding Zanara's arm, Ethan stared into her eyes. The patrol's ultimatum echoed in her mind: surrender or be erased. Ethan, unaware of the alien words, could still feel the pressure building, like the seconds before a storm hit. "Together or nothing," he repeated, voice hoarse but steady, like he was daring the universe itself to stop him. Zanara, for the first time in her years of command, felt her logic falter. Her armor pulsed weakly, keeping the enemy ship's sensors confused, but it wouldn't last. She looked at Ethan, this stubborn human, dusty and armed with a useless shotgun, and realized he wasn't backing down. It wasn't blind bravery. It was something deeper, something the Clithians had forgotten in their pursuit of perfection. Purpose. "You don't understand what you're up against," she said, but the cold edge in her voice was gone. "They don't negotiate. They don't hesitate. Then we don't give them a chance." Ethan shot back, pulling her behind the truck just as a beam of light slammed into the ground, kicking up dirt and rocks. The impact shook the earth, and the heat made sweat trickle down his face. "Where's your ship? We need to get there before we're toast." Zanara pointed to a rock formation a few kilometers away, half hidden in the dark. "There, but the ship is offline. I need time to restart the core." She paused, sensing the chaos around them. "You can't help me with that. Wanna bet?" Ethan smirked, already sprinting toward the rocks, dragging her with him. "Fixing stuff is kind of my thing." The run through the desert was a blur of adrenaline. The Clithian ship tracked them, its scanners slicing through the dark like knives. Zanara used her armor to send out pulses, throwing off its targeting systems, but each blast drained her more. Ethan, panting, kept pace, ignoring the weight of the shotgun and the uneven ground. He didn't know why he was risking everything for an alien he'd just met, but something about her, maybe the way those golden eyes carried more weight than anyone he'd ever known, kept him going. They reached Zanara's ship, hidden among the rocks like some ancient relic. Its hull, dulled and damaged, pulsed faintly, like a heart struggling to beat. Zanara rushed to an external panel, her fingers dancing over glowing symbols Ethan couldn't even begin to understand. "The core's unstable," she muttered. "If I can't stabilize it, we're not getting off the ground, and they'll find us." Ethan looked up at the sky. The enemy ship was closer now, the hum turning into a roar that rattled his bones. "How much time do you need?" "More than we have," she replied, her filaments trembling. 5 minutes. Maybe less if I'm precise." Ethan glanced around, his mind working fast. He didn't know alien tech, but he knew how to improvise. Scattered near the ship were twisted metal scraps, leftovers from the crash landing. A crazy idea, classic Ethan, started forming. "You focus on the ship. I'll distract them." Zanara turned, eyes wide. "You can't." Heard that one before. He cut in, grabbing a bent piece of metal off the ground. "Just do what you have to do. I'll be back." Before she could stop him, he was running toward the open plain, holding the metal like a makeshift shield. Everything happened fast. Against all odds, Ethan began shouting and waving the metal, reflecting the moonlight to grab the Clithian ship's attention. He knew it was a death sentence, but every second he bought was a second more for Zanara. The enemy ship redirected its sensors, cannons turning toward him. A beam of energy sliced through the air, missing by inches. The shockwave hurled Ethan to the ground, knocking the wind out of him. Inside the ship, Zanara felt a tightness in her chest she couldn't explain. Her sensors registered his heat, his rapid heartbeat, the danger. He was sacrificing himself for her. A human, for a Clithian who should have been his enemy. Against every directive, she left the panel and ran outside, activating the last pulse left in her suit. The energy wave hit the enemy ship, making it wobble midair, but it also drained her completely. She collapsed to her knees, exhausted, as Ethan crawled away from the smoking crater. "You're insane," she whispered, dragging him into the shadow of her ship. "Why did you do that?" Ethan coughed, his face streaked with dirt, but eyes still shining. "Because you needed time, and I don't leave things half done." The Clithian ship stabilized above, its cannons powering up again. Time was almost up, and Zanara knew the choice she faced couldn't be undone. Save herself, or fight for this human who had defied everything she knew. The Nevada desert seemed to swallow the chaos around them, but the silence between Ethan and Zanara felt heavier than the roar of the ship above. The alien commander, now drained of all power, struggled to breathe. Her sensory filaments drooped like wilted petals. Ethan, still on the ground, felt his whole body protest. Every muscle ached, and the smell of scorched earth filled his lungs from the beam's blast. The Clithian ship, briefly thrown off by her pulse, was adjusting its position, the cannons glowing cold and deadly. Zanara grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him behind a rock. "You're insane," she said, her voice broken, not with command, but something else he recognized immediately: concern. "Why didn't you run when you had a chance?" Ethan managed a half-smile despite the pain. "Running doesn't solve anything. Besides, you still owe me an explanation." He motioned toward the sky. "Those guys don't look like the sorry my bad type." Zanara didn't respond right away. Her armor, now dim and lifeless, felt heavier than ever. The pulse she used to save Ethan had emptied her reserves, leaving her completely exposed. Worse, her ship's emergency beacon was still active, sending a weak signal into the dark, drawing the patrol closer every second. She knew Clithian protocol: eliminate all witnesses, erase every failure. Ethan, with his stubborn humanity, was both. "My mission was to observe your species," she said, her golden eyes fixed on the burning horizon. "But I failed. My ship crashed, and now you're involved. They won't stop until we're both erased." Ethan pushed himself up, ignoring the pain in his shoulder from a flying rock. "Then we don't make it easy for them." He looked at her ship, half buried in the rocks. "You said you need to stabilize the core. What does that mean? Like changing a battery or something?" Zanara tilted her head, clearly thrown by the simplification. "The core is the ship's energy source. It's destabilized, emitting pulses that are giving away our location. If I can't repair it, we don't launch, and they'll find us." "All right," Ethan said, already heading for the ship. "Show me this core thing. If it's something that needs fixing, I'm your guy." Zanara hesitated. No Clithian would ever trust a lower species being to touch tech this advanced. But with the enemy closing in, she had no choice. "Follow me," she said, leading him into the ship. Inside, the vessel felt like a living thing, a maze of organic surfaces and pulsing lights. Ethan shivered but pushed past the discomfort. Zanara opened a panel, revealing a glowing sphere floating midair, emitting unstable waves of heat and light. "The core," she explained. "I need to realign the energy conduits, but without my armor, I don't have the precision." Ethan stared at the sphere, which looked like a tiny sun. "All right, just tell me what to do. I've got good hands." He cracked his fingers, still stained with grease, like he was about to fix a truck instead of save the world. Zanara guided him, pointing out specific spots where he needed to press or twist components that looked like they were made of liquid glass. Each movement was risky. One wrong move could overload the core and blow up the ship, along with everything around it. But Ethan worked with an annoyingly calm focus, whistling a country tune as he aligned the conduits. "Ever think about writing a manual for this thing?" he joked, even as the ground trembled from the patrol drawing closer. Zanara watched him, captivated. Humans were illogical, fragile, but this one, he acted like the fate of the universe depended on him, and somehow, that made her want to believe it did. For the first time, she felt something beyond duty: admiration. But the calm didn't last. A loud boom shook the ship, and a metallic voice echoed from outside, this time in English, as if the patrol had cracked the local language. "Commander Zanara, your betrayal has been confirmed. Surrender, or the human will be terminated first." Ethan froze, locking eyes with her. "Betrayal? That's new. What aren't you telling me?" Zanara looked down. "I disobeyed orders by not eliminating you on first contact. They know now. To them, my hesitation is betrayal." Ethan laughed, despite everything. "So you're in trouble because of me? Well, that makes two of us rebels." He finished adjusting the last conduit, and the core began to glow steadily. "Done. Now what?" Zanara checked the controls. The core was stable, but the ship still needed a few minutes to power up, and the patrol wasn't going to wait. Another energy beam hit the rocks nearby, making the ship's ceiling vibrate. "They're aiming to destroy," she said. "If we stay, we die." Ethan looked at the exit, then back at her. "You said they'll hunt me down even if you leave, right? Then we face them. Together." Zanara felt a strange heat rise inside her, something that didn't come from the ship's core. It was his determination, infecting her like a virus. She knew fighting was suicide, but leaving Ethan behind wasn't an option anymore. "There's a weapon in the ship," she said, pointing to a compartment. "It's not like your shotgun, but you can use it." Ethan picked up the device. It looked like a glowing light pistol, and grinned. "Now we're talking the same language." As the enemy ship descended, its lights cutting through the darkness, Ethan and Zanara prepared for the impossible. To face a Clithian patrol, knowing the consequences of their choice could change everything for them, and maybe even for the universe. The Nevada desert seemed to hold its breath as the Clithian ship hovered overhead, its cannons glowing with a cold light that promised annihilation. Inside Zanara's damaged ship, Ethan gripped the alien weapon, his fingers still adjusting to the strange weight and the heat it radiated. He had no idea how to actually use it, but the determined look on his face said that wouldn't stop him. Zanara, beside him, monitored the control panel, her sensory filaments pulsing from the ship's now stable core as it slowly powered up. "They're waiting for us to surrender," Zanara said, her golden eyes locked on the holographic readings. "But they won't negotiate. They'll fire the second they lock on." Her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before, a mix of resignation and something she didn't want to name. Guilt, maybe. Guilt for dragging this human into the fallout of her failure. Ethan glanced at her, sweat running down his face, but his eyes still burned with defiance. "Then let's not give them what they want. You said this thing does what exactly?" He held up the weapon. "It fires concentrated plasma pulses," Zanara explained, pointing at the device. "It can damage their systems, but you'll need to be accurate. One mistake and..." She trailed off, her filaments twitching. "You're not trained for this." "I wasn't trained to fix alien ships either. And yet, here we are." Ethan shot back, adjusting the grip on the weapon with a confidence that bordered on crazy. "Just tell me where to aim. I'll handle the rest." Zanara stared at him, torn between logic screaming to abandon him and the emotion rising inside her like a fire she couldn't put out. Humans were fragile, irrational, but Ethan, he was different. He didn't just face the impossible. He made it seem possible. For the first time, she understood why the Clithians feared human unpredictability. "When their ship descends," she said, showing a holographic projection of the incoming patrol, "aim for the energy emitters, those bright points at the base. One hit could disable the cannons." She paused, then added, "If you miss, there won't be a second chance." Ethan smirked, a grin that seemed to challenge the universe itself. "Nice try, but I don't miss when it counts." Then, everything happened fast. The Clithian ship descended, the roar of its engines shaking the ground. Ethan left Zanara's ship, using the rocks as cover, while she stayed inside adjusting the controls for takeoff. He took position, the alien weapon firm in his hands, and aimed. The first shot missed. The plasma pulse clipped a nearby rock, blowing it apart in a shower of sparks. The enemy ship immediately retaliated, a beam slicing the air and blasting the ground just meters away. Ethan rolled to the side, heart pounding, but adrenaline kept him sharp. "You okay?" Zanara shouted, her voice echoing from the ship's entrance. "Never better." he shouted back, laughing as he took aim again. This time, the shot hit squarely. One of the emitters exploded, sending silvery smoke trailing from the base of the ship. Ethan felt a rush of triumph, but there was no time to celebrate. Another beam fired, and he barely dove behind a rock in time. Inside the ship, Zanara was working frantically. The core was almost ready, but she knew that even if they took off, the patrol would track them. Her logical mind told her the only solution was to leave Ethan behind, escape alone, and preserve her mission. But then she looked outside, saw him firing at a ship that could erase him in an instant, and something changed. For the first time, she understood what it meant to fight for someone not out of duty, but by choice. Zanara ran out of the ship, ignoring protocol. "Ethan, get back," she shouted, activating a portable device that projected a temporary shield around him. The next blast from the enemy ship ricocheted off the barrier, but the effort dropped her to her knees, her sensory filaments dimmed by exhaustion. Ethan rushed to her, dragging her back inside the ship. "What are you doing? I told you. I had it under control." "You're an idiot," Zanara muttered, but her voice held a new tone, something close to affection. "No one risks this much for nothing." "You're not nothing," Ethan said, helping her up. "Now finish powering this ship. I'll hold them off." As Zanara returned to the console, Ethan fired again, landing another shot on one of the enemy's emitters. The patrol ship pulled back, its systems damaged, buying them precious time. Inside, the core finally stabilized, and the ship's lights flared to full strength. Zanara glanced at Ethan, still holding the weapon, his face covered in dust, but his eyes full of something new, something she hadn't expected: trust. "Do you trust me?" she asked, fingers hovering over the launch controls. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, chuckling. "After all this, I think I do. What about you? Do you trust me?" Zanara hesitated, but her filaments picked up something she couldn't ignore: his sincerity, burning bright like a star. "Yes," she said, almost surprised by her own answer. "I do." The ship started to vibrate, the engines coming to life. They weren't safe yet. The patrol was still tracking them, and the desert was scarred by the battle. But in that moment, something bigger had taken root, a bond neither of them had expected. Ethan, the stubborn mechanic, and Zanara, the exiled commander, were now more than allies. They were partners, ready to face whatever came next. Zanara's ship shook as the engines roared, kicking up a storm of dust and sand across the Nevada desert. The glow of the ship's lights pulsed like the heartbeat of a living thing. But the moment of relief was short-lived. In the sky, the Clithian ship, damaged but not defeated, had recovered and was now blocking their escape route, its cannons glowing with an energy that lit the desert like a second sun. The enemy's engine hum was deafening, and the ground quaked with the threat of incoming fire. Ethan stood at the entrance, still gripping the plasma weapon, his face hard with determination. "They're not giving up, are they?" he shouted over the roar, glancing back at Zanara as she fought to recalibrate the launch systems. "They never do," she replied, her filaments dark from exhaustion, but her golden eyes burned with fear and resolve. "If we don't escape now, they'll erase us, and everything we know, with us." She didn't say the rest, that her betrayal, the choice to protect a human, had already sealed her fate among the Clithians. Ethan looked up at the enemy ship, hovering like a beast of light and metal. He knew their chances were slim, but surrender wasn't in his vocabulary. "Then we find a way through. What's the plan?" Zanara hesitated. The ship was flight ready, but the shields were down, and a head-on collision with the patrol would be suicide. There was, however, one risky option, a hyper-acceleration maneuver that could launch them beyond Earth's orbit. But with a freshly repaired core, the risk of explosion was high. She looked at Ethan, who stared back with that same reckless confidence that defied logic. "There's a chance," she said, "but it could kill us." Ethan laughed, the sound cutting through the tension like a blade. "Better try than get vaporized standing still. Do what you gotta do, Commander." Zanara nodded, but before she could activate the sequence, an energy beam from the Clithian ship slammed into the side of their vessel, sending it into a violent shake. Ethan was thrown against the wall, the plasma gun knocked from his hands. Alarms blared, and Zanara shouted something in her native tongue, the control panels flashing red. "The core's overloading," she cried. "If we don't stabilize it now, we'll explode before we even lift off." Ethan dragged himself over to her, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. "Tell me what to do," he said, voice steady despite the chaos. Zanara pointed to an auxiliary panel where energy cables glowed like exposed veins. "You need to manually redirect the flow. Turn the conduits to the left, but be careful. One wrong move, and the core implodes." As Ethan worked, another blast hit the ship, and a crack split across the hull, venting air with a sharp hiss. Zanara knew they were out of time. She looked at Ethan, sweating, focused, risking everything for a cause that wasn't even his. And then, against every directive she'd ever known, she did something no Clithian would. She let go of logic. "Ethan," she said, her voice nearly drowned by the chaos, "if we don't make it, just know you changed everything. For me." He paused for just a second, his eyes locking with hers. "You're not so bad yourself, you know," he said, flashing a grin that lit up the inside of the ship. "Now let's get the hell out of here." With one final twist, Ethan stabilized the flow, and the core lit up with a steady, white glow. Zanara activated the hyperacceleration, but the enemy ship fired again, hitting the main engine. Her ship spun out of control, and Ethan grabbed the panel to keep from being thrown. "Hold on," he shouted, while Zanara fought to regain control. That's when the truth hit like a punch to the gut. Zanara saw it on the sensors, a secondary signal coming from the enemy's ship. This wasn't just a patrol. It was a containment squad, sent to make sure she never returned. They'd known about her betrayal from the start. And worse, the sensors detected a planetary annihilation weapon charging. If they failed, it wouldn't just be their deaths. It would be Earth's too. "They're going to destroy everything," Zanara whispered, panic creeping into her voice for the first time. "Because of me." Ethan, not fully grasping the scale of what she was saying, grabbed her shoulder. "Hey, look at me. This isn't your fault. We're going to stop them. Together." Zanara knew now that hyperacceleration wouldn't be enough. There was one last option, using her ship as a weapon, crashing it into the enemy vessel to disable the planetary cannon. It meant destroying the ship and likely themselves. She looked at Ethan, still gripping the plasma weapon, still ready to fight. "There's one way," she said, her voice shaking. "But there's no turning back." Ethan understood without needing the rest spelled out. He looked out at the desert, thinking about his garage, the quiet nights under the stars, the simple life he might never see again. Then he looked back at Zanara, and something bigger took over. "If we're going to save the world, might as well go out with style," he said, voice firm. "Do it." Zanara programmed the collision, locking the ship's trajectory onto the enemy core. The impact will be catastrophic, but it might be enough. As the ship accelerated, she felt Ethan's hand wrap around hers, a human gesture that grounded her. The desert blurred away, and the Clithian ship loomed ahead like a beast made of light and death. At the last second, Zanara activated a containment field, a desperate attempt to shield the ship's core. The impact hit like thunder, a flash of blinding light swallowing everything. Ethan and Zanara were thrown against the console, and then darkness. When the dust settled, the enemy ship was in pieces, raining metal across the Nevada desert. But Zanara's ship was gone too, smoke curling up from the wreckage. Ethan and Zanara were miraculously alive, trapped in the ruins, wounded, but together. The cost of victory was steep. Their only way out was gone, and the Clithians, now alerted, would send reinforcements. The Nevada desert, now scorched and scarred, fell into an eerie silence after the explosion. The remains of Zanara's ship lay scattered among the rocks, bits of alien metal glinting under the moonlight like fragments of a fallen star. Ethan coughed, chest burning as he crawled out of the wreckage, dust clinging to his torn clothes and bruised face. Beside him, Zanara struggled to stand, her armor cracked, her sensory filaments limp. The golden glow in her eyes had dimmed, but it was still there. "You okay?" Ethan asked, voice hoarse, reaching out to help her. He could barely stay upright himself, a deep gash on his arm and sharp pain in his ribs, but his first instinct was to check on her. Zanara took his hand, a gesture that, hours ago, would have been unthinkable for a Clithian. "I survived," she said, almost in disbelief. "You did too. How?" Ethan gave a tired smile, wiping blood off his arm with a torn sleeve. "Stubbornness, I guess. And a little luck." He glanced around. The enemy ships remained still smoldering in the distance. "We did it, huh? Earth's safe for now." Zanara nodded, but her face, at least what Ethan could interpret of it, was heavy. "You disabled the planetary weapon," she said, pointing toward the wreckage. "But the Clithians know what happened. They'll come. Maybe not today, but soon." She paused, her filaments trembling faintly. "And I no longer have a ship to run, or to protect you." Ethan sat on a rock, his whole body aching with every movement. The desert, once familiar, now felt strange, like the universe had been around them. "Protect me, huh? Funny. I thought I was the one saving you." He chuckled, but the sound faded quickly. Reality was settling in. They'd won the battle, but the war was just beginning. Zanara knelt beside him, inspecting the wound on his arm. "You're hurt," she said, almost accusingly. Her fingers, cold but precise, touched his skin, and Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with pain. She opened a small compartment in her cracked armor, pulling out a device that emitted a soft light, sealing the wound with surgical precision. "You shouldn't have done that," she murmured. "Risk everything for me." Ethan met her gaze, her golden eyes now mixed with something he recognized, gratitude. "You risked everything too," he said. "Up there, when you could have left me behind. Why didn't you?" Zanara looked away, her filaments catching the cold desert breeze. "I don't know," she admitted. "Logic told me to go. But you're different. You don't act like the files describe humans. You don't quit, even when you should." Ethan laughed through the pain. "Yeah, my grandpa always said I was too stubborn for my own good." He stood, stretching with a groan. "So what now? 'Cause sitting around waiting for your friends to come finish the job doesn't sound like a great plan." Zanara looked over the wreckage of the ship. "There's an emergency transmitter in the debris. I could try to send a signal to a dissident Clithian faction, the ones who question our species' superiority. They might help us, but it's risky. They might not arrive in time, or might label us traitors too." Ethan crossed his arms, thinking, what if we don't call anyone? Like, we just lay low for a while. I know some spots out here in the desert where no one, alien or men in black, is going to find you. Zanara tilted her head, intrigued. "You suggest I hide among humans? Live is one of them." The idea was absurd to a Clithian, but something about its simplicity pulled at her. "I wouldn't even know how. My appearance, my tech. I wouldn't exactly blend in." "You've got me," Ethan said, with a surprising amount of confidence. "I'll teach you how to be human, or at least fake it pretty well." He pointed toward the pickup truck, miraculously still intact a few yards away. "First, let's get out of here. My shop's got a basement. Not a starship, but it's safe." Zanara hesitated, but something about his presence, the warmth in his voice, made her want to believe it could work. For the first time, she imagined a future beyond the mission, beyond the war. "You trust me enough for this?" she asked, echoing a question she had once posed. Ethan smiled. "After everything we've been through, I think we're way past trust. We're a team now." They walked to the truck, leaning on each other, the desert dust still clinging to their clothes. The pickup carried them away from the wreckage, the horizon swallowing the last remnants of the battle. Sitting beside Ethan, Zanara felt something unfamiliar. Not just relief, but a connection that crossed species. They had survived, but at a cost. Zanara's freedom, Ethan's quiet life. Still, in that moment of calm, with the engine humming and stars overhead, they both knew, whatever the future held, they'd face it together. Ethan's truck cut through the darkness of the Nevada desert, its engine humming beneath the heavy silence of the night. The stars shone above, indifferent to the chaos that had played out hours earlier. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other arm still aching from the wounds Zanara's tech had sealed. Beside him, the alien commander stared out the window, her golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. Her sensory filaments, now slowly pulsing again, absorbed the hum of the human world. The wind, the motor, Ethan's steady heartbeat. For once, she wasn't analyzing these sensations. She was just feeling them. Ethan's shop, an old metal structure on the edge of Highway 50, appeared on the horizon like a strange beacon of safety. He parked, the engine sputtering to a stop. "Welcome to my castle," he said with a crooked smile, trying to lighten the mood. "It ain't much, but it's home." Zanara stepped out of the truck, her cracked armor creaking with every move. She looked so out of place there, an otherworldly figure among old tires and oil cans. "You live like this?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "So simple." Ethan laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Simple, yeah, but it works. Sometimes, that's all you need." He opened the door, revealing the cluttered interior, tools scattered everywhere, and an old radio humming a country tune. "The basement's down there. Not exactly a bunker, but no one's gonna find you." Zanara followed, her steps cautious. The basement was small, bare concrete walls, and a flickering bulb hanging overhead. Ethan tossed a blanket over a makeshift chair and pointed to a corner stacked with boxes. "You can stay here until we figure out the next move. The Clithians, they'll take a while to track you, right?" She sat down, her filaments picking up the scent of oil and rust. "They'll come," she said quietly. "Not tomorrow, maybe not for weeks, but they will. My betrayal is unforgivable to them. And you." She looked at him, guilt darkening her gaze. "You'll be a target because of me." Ethan crouched in front of her, meeting her eye level. "Look, Zanara, I didn't ask for an alien to crash into my backyard, but I'm not sorry, either. We took on a warship together. I think I can handle a few space bounty hunters." He smiled, but there was steel behind it. "You're not alone in this." Zanara tilted her head. That gesture Ethan was starting to recognize as her way of processing emotions she didn't fully understand. "Why do you do this?" she asked. "You could have left me behind. You could be safe right now, in your simplicity." Ethan stood, scratching his scruffy beard. "Because leaving someone behind just isn't who I am. And, I don't know, maybe I think you're worth a risk." He paused, his eyes softening. "Have you ever thought about what you actually want? Not what your leaders command, but what you want." The question caught her off guard. Clithians didn't think in terms of desire. They followed orders, calculated outcomes, executed missions. But down there, in that dusty basement, with a human who made no sense at all, Zanara felt something new. Freedom. Not the kind tied to ships or stars, but the kind that lets you decide who you want to be. "I want to understand," she said, surprised by her own words. "To understand why you fight, why you trust, why you never give up." Ethan smiled, sitting down beside her. "That's a start. And hey, maybe I'll teach you to appreciate bad coffee and country music. That's what humans do when we're trying to figure life out." For the first time, Zanara laughed, a strange metallic sound but real. It was the first time she'd expressed something truly human, and Ethan felt a warmth in his chest he couldn't explain. They were from different worlds, separated by galaxies and logic. But in that moment, they were just two souls trying to find their place. The radio upstairs crackled, breaking the silence. A muffled voice announced, "Reports of strange lights over Ely. Authorities urge calm." Ethan and Zanara exchanged a look. Earth didn't know what had really happened yet, but the truth was coming, like a storm on the horizon. "You think anyone's going to believe me?" Ethan asked, half joking, half serious. Like, "Hey, I saved the world with an alien." Zanara shook her head, a gesture that looked almost human. "They don't need to believe you. You know what you did. And I..." She hesitated, her filaments glowing faintly. "I'll never forget." Their arc wasn't ending with fanfare or glory, but with a quiet promise. Ethan had found a purpose beyond his garage, and Zanara had found a reason to question everything her people stood for. They weren't heroes of the galaxy, but they were heroes to each other, and that was enough. As the night deepened, Ethan grabbed a bottle of water and held it out to Zanara, who took it with curiosity. "To the future," he said, raising it in an impromptu toast. "To the future," she echoed, and for the first time, the future felt like something worth building. 6 months later, the Nevada desert looked untouched, like the chaos of that fateful night had just been a fever dream. Ethan's shop, however, bore quiet scars. A crack in the basement wall, a new pile of tools replacing those that were lost, and a stillness that had secrets bigger than the desert itself. The radio still occasionally buzzed with reports of unexplained sightings, but life in Ely moved on, unaware of what had truly happened. Ethan sat on the porch, fixing the carburetor of an old pickup, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange. He looked the same as always, plaid shirt, grease-stained hands, whistling some country tune, but there was something new in his eyes. A depth, like he'd seen the universe and decided it was still worth fixing engines for. In the basement, Zanara worked in silence, no longer wearing her Clithian armor. Now she wore human clothes, a denim jacket and boots Ethan swore fit the desert vibe, though her silver blue skin and glowing filaments still made her stand out. She had rebuilt a transmitter from the ship's wreckage, sending encoded messages to the Clithian dissidents, the ones who believed coexistence was possible. So far, no one had answered, but she kept trying. She had to, not after everything they'd been through. "You done down there?" Ethan called, eyes still on the carburetor. "I'm thinking chili for dinner. You gotta try it. It's part of your crash course in being human." Zanara climbed the stairs, her filaments catching the scent of oil and old metal. "Chili?" she asked, a trace of curiosity in her voice. "Is it edible?" Ethan laughed, wiping his hands on a rag. "More or less. But it's tradition. You'll either love it or hate it. There's no in-between." He looked at her, noticing how much more at ease she seemed now. "Any word from your rebel friends?" She shook her head. "Not yet, but the signal's live. If they're listening, they'll find us." She paused, golden eyes focused on the horizon. "And if the others come first, I'll be ready." Ethan stepped away from the truck and leaned on the porch railing. "We'll be ready," he said, his voice firm. "You're not alone anymore, remember?" Zanara looked at him, and for the first time, her filaments glowed with a gentle warmth, almost like a smile. "I remember," she said softly. "You taught me that." The months since the battle had been a delicate dance of adaptation. Zanara had learned how to blend in, or at least try. Ethan taught her how to drive the truck, how to make coffee, though she still hated the taste, and even how to laugh at bad jokes. In return, she shared glimpses of her world, stories of distant stars, of wars that made the desert seem tiny, of a people who had forgotten what it meant to feel. They were opposites in every way, but somehow that made them complete. The future was still uncertain. The Clithians could show up any day, and Earth, blissfully unaware, wasn't ready. But Ethan and Zanara had found something stronger than fear, a shared purpose. They weren't just survivors, they were guardians, ready to protect what mattered, whether it was a dusty workshop or an entire planet. That night, under a sky full of stars, Ethan and Zanara sat on the porch, sharing a bowl of chili that she ate with a curious grimace. "This is interesting," she said, and Ethan laughed, the sound echoing across the desert. "You'll get used to it," he said, pointing upward. "See that? That's Orion. My grandpa used to say it guides the lost back home." Zanara looked at the stars, her filaments sensing the warmth of him beside her. "Home," she repeated, the word unfamiliar, but comforting. "I think I'm starting to understand what that means." The radio crackled in the background, but neither of them paid any attention. In that moment, the universe could wait. They had found something no galaxy, no war, no difference in species could erase. A home, built not from concrete or metal, but from trust and courage. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey with Ethan and Zanara. If this story of courage and connection moved you, leave a comment and let us know what you thought. And don't forget to subscribe for more adventures that cross stars and hearts.